The Knights of the Cross by Henryk Sienkiewicz. Click the bell to get notifications about new videos. Chapter 20. The old Lodyka was not mistaken when he said that Zbyszko and Jagiełło were fond of each other, and even that they longed for each other. Jagiełło, pretending that she wanted to visit the sick Mako, went very often to Bogdaniec, either alone or with her father. Zbyszko also went often to Zgorzelce. In that way, after a few days, a familiarity and friendship originated between them. They grew fond of each other and talked about everything that interested them. There was much mutual admiration in that friendship also. The young and handsome Zbyszko, who had already distinguished himself in the war, had participated in tournaments and had been in the presence of kings, was considered by the girl, when she compared him with Chtan of Rogo or Wilk of Brzowa, a true courtly knight and almost a prince. As for him, he was astonished at the great beauty of the girl. He was loyal to Danusia, but very often when he looked suddenly at Jagiełło, either in the forest or at home, he said involuntarily to himself, "Hey, what a girl!" When, helping her to mount her horse, he felt her elastic flesh under his hands, disquietude filled him and he shivered, and a torpor began to steal over him. Jagiełło, although naturally proud, inclined to raillery, and even aggressive, grew more and more gentle with him, often looking in his eyes to discover how she could please him. He understood her affection, he was grateful for it, and he liked to be with her more and more. Finally, especially after Mako began to drink the bear's grease, they saw each other almost every day. When the splinter came out of the wound, they went together to get some fresh beaver's grease, necessary for the healing of the wound. They took their crossbows, mounted their horses, and went first to Mochidoli, destined for Jagiełło's dowry, then to the edge of the forest, where they entrusted the horses to a servant and went on foot, because it was impossible to pass through the thicket on horseback. While walking, Jagiełło pointed to the large meadow covered with reeds and to the blue ribbon of forest, and said, "Those woods belong to Chtan of Rogo." "The same man who would like to take you?" She began to laugh. "He would if he could. You can defend yourself very easily, having for your defense the Wilk who, as I understand, gnashes his teeth at Chtan. I wonder that they have not challenged each other to fight until death. They have not, because Tatulo, before he went to the war, said to them, 'If you fight about Jagiełło, I do not want to see you any more.'" "How could they fight then? When they are in Zgorzelce, they scowl at each other, but afterward they drink together in an inn in Krzesnia until they are drunk." "Stupid boys. Why? Because while Zyk was away, one of them should have taken you by force. What could Zyk do, if when he returned he had found you with a baby on your lap?" At this, Jagiełło's blue eyes flashed immediately. "Do you think I would let them take me? Have we not people in Zgorzelce, and do I not know how to manage a crossbow or a boar spear? Let them try. I would chase them back home and even attack them in Rogov or Brzozowa. Father knew very well that he could go to the war and leave me home alone." Speaking thus, she frowned and shook the crossbow threateningly, so that Zbyszko began to laugh and said, "You ought to have been a knight and not a girl." She, becoming calmer, answered, "Chtan guarded me from Wilk and Wilk from Chtan. Then I was also under the abbot's tutelage, and it is well for everyone to let the abbot alone." "Oh ah," answered Zbyszko, "they are all afraid of the abbot. But I, may St. George help me to speak the truth to you, I would neither be afraid of the abbot, nor of your peasants, nor of yourself. I would take you." At this Jagiełło stopped on the spot, and fixing her eyes on Zbyszko, asked in a strange, soft, low voice, "You would take me?" Then her lips parted, and blushing like the dawn, she waited for his answer. But he evidently was only thinking what he would do, were he in Chtan or Wilk's position, because after a while he shook his golden hair and said further, "A girl must marry and not fight with the boys. Unless you have a third one, you must choose one of these two." "You must not tell me that," answered the girl, sadly. "Why not? I have been away from home for a long time. Therefore I do not know whether there is somebody around Zgorzelce of whom you are fond or not." "Hey," answered Jagiełło, "let it be." They walked along silently, trying to make their way through the thicket, which was now much denser because the bushes and the trees were covered with wild hop vines. Zbyszko walked first, tearing down the green vines, and breaking the branches here and there. Yagienka followed him with a crossbow on her shoulder, looking like a hunting goddess. "Beyond that thicket," said she, "there is a deep brook, but I know where the ford is. I have long boots on, reaching above my knees. We can cross it," answered Zbyszko. Shortly afterward, they reached the brook. Yagienka, being familiar with the Mochidlovsky forests, very easily found the ford, but the water was deeper than usual, the little brook being swollen by the rains. Then Zbyszko, without asking her permission, seized the girl in his arms. "I can cross by myself," said Yagienka. "Put your arms around my neck," answered Zbyszko. He walked slowly through the water, while the girl nestled to him. Finally, when they were near the other shore, she said, "Zbyszku." "What?" "I care neither for Tan nor for Wilk." As he placed her on the shore, he answered excitedly, "May God give you the best you are, he will not be wronged." The Odstaini lake was not far away now. Yagienka, walking in front, turned from time to time, and putting a finger on her lips, ordered Zbyszko to be silent. They were walking amidst the osiers and gray willows, on low, damp ground. From the left side were heard the voices of birds, and Zbyszko was surprised at that, because it was time for the birds to migrate. "We are near a morass which is never frozen," whispered Jagienka. "The ducks pass the winter there. Even in the lake the water freezes only near the shores. See how it is steaming." Zbyszko looked through the willows and noticed in front of him something like a bank of fog. It was the Odstaini lake. Jagienka again put a finger to her lips, and after a while they reached the lake. The girl climbed on an old willow and bent over the water. Zbyszko followed her example, and for a long time they remained quiet, seeing nothing in front of them on account of the fog, hearing nothing but the mournful puling of lapwings. Finally the wind blew, rustled the osiers and the yellow leaves of the willows, and disclosed the waters of the lake, which were slightly ruffled by the wind. "Do you see anything?" whispered Zbyszko. "No, keep quiet." After a while, the wind ceased and complete silence followed. Then on the surface of the lake appeared one head, then another. Finally, near them, a big beaver entered the water from the shore, carrying in his mouth a newly cut branch, and began to swim amidst the duckweed and marigold, holding his mouth out of the water and pushing the branch before him. Zbyszko, lying on the trunk beneath Yagienka, noticed that her elbow moved quietly and that her head was bent forward. Evidently she had aimed at the animal which, not suspecting any danger, was swimming close by, toward the clear water. Finally the string of the crossbow twanged, and at the same moment Yagienka cried, "I hit him! I hit him!" Zbyszko instantly climbed higher and looked through the thicket toward the water. The beaver plunged into the water, then reappeared on the surface, turning somersets. "I hit him hard! He will soon be quiet," said Jagienka. The movements of the animal grew slower, and then before one had time sufficient to recite one Morae, to recite one Ave Maria, he was floating on his back on the surface of the water. "I will go and get him," said Zbyszko. "Do not go. Here, near the shore, there is deep slime. Anyone who does not know how to manage will surely drown." "Then how will we get him?" "He will be in Bogdaniec this evening. Do not worry about that. Now we must go home." "You hit him hard." "Bah, it is not the first one. Other girls are afraid to even look at a crossbow, but with you, one can go to the forest all his life." Jagienka smiled at such praise, but she did not answer. They returned the same way they came. Zbyszko asked her about the beavers, and she told him how many of them there were in Mochidoli, and how many in Zgorzelitsa. Suddenly she struck her hip with her hand and exclaimed, "Well, I left my arrows on the willow. Wait!" Before he could say that he would return for them, she jumped back like a roe and disappeared. Zbyszko waited and waited. At last he began to wonder what detained her so long. "She must have lost the arrows and is searching for them," he said to himself. "But I will go and see whether anything has happened to her." He had hardly started to return before the girl appeared with her bow in her hand, her face smiling and blushing, and with the beaver on her shoulders. "For God's sake!" cried Zbyszko. "How did you get him?" "How? I went into the water, that is all. It is nothing new for me, but I did not want you to go, because the mud drags anyone down who does not know how to swim in it. And I waited here like a fool. You are a sly girl. Well, could I undress before you? Bah! If I had followed you, then I would have seen a wonder. Be silent. I was just starting, so help me God. Be silent. After a while, wishing to turn the conversation, she said, Wring my tress, it makes my back wet. Zbyszko caught the tress in one hand and began to wring with the other, saying, The best way will be to unbraid it, then the wind will soon dry it. But she did not wish to do that, on account of the thicket through which they were obliged to make their way. Zbyszko now put the beaver on his shoulders. Jagiełło, walking in front of him, said, Now Mako will soon be well, because there is no better medicine for a wound than the grease of a bear inside, and the grease of a beaver outside. In about 2 weeks, he will be able to ride a horse. May God grant that, answered Zbyszko. I am waiting for it as for salvation, because I cannot leave the sick man, and it is hard for me to stay here. Why is it hard for you to stay here? She asked him. Has Zyk told you nothing about Danusia? He did tell me something. I know that she covered you with her veil. I know that. He told me also that every knight makes some vow to serve his lady, but he said that such a vow did not amount to anything, that some of the knights were married, but they served their ladies just the same. But Danusia, Zbyszko, tell me about her. Having come very close to him, she began to look at his face with great anxiety. He did not pay any attention to her frightened voice and looks, but said, She is my lady, and at the same time she is my sweetest love. I have not spoken about her to anybody, but I am going to tell you, because we have been acquainted since we were children. I will follow her beyond the 10th river, and beyond the 10th sea, to the Germans and to the Tartars, because there is no other girl like her. Let my uncle remain in Bogdaniec, and I will go to her. What do I care about Bogdaniec, the household, the herds, or the abbot's wealth, without her? I will mount my horse and I will go. So help me God, I will fulfill that which I promised her, or I will die. I did not know, answered Jagiełło in a hollow voice. Zbyszko began to tell her about all that had happened, how he had met Danusia in Tyniec, how he had made a vow to her, about everything that happened afterward, about his imprisonment, and how Danusia rescued him, about Juran's refusal, their farewell and his loneliness, finally about his joy, because as soon as Mako became well, he would go to his beloved girl. His story was interrupted at last by the sight of the servant with the horses, waiting on the edge of the forest. Jagiełło immediately mounted her horse and began to bid Zbyszko goodbye. Let the servant follow you with the beaver. I am going to Zgorzelec. Then you will not go to Bogdaniec. Zeke is there. No, Tatulo said he would return and told me to go home. Well, may God reward you for the beaver. With God. Then Jagiełło was alone. Going home through the heaths, she looked back for a while after Zbyszko. When he disappeared beyond the trees, she covered her eyes with her hands as if sheltering them from the sunlight. But soon large tears began to flow down her cheeks and drop one after another on the horse's mane.
Remember to subscribe.